Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 145, with today's guest, Francisca Iseli, co-founder of Basic Bananas and co-author of the book Perception.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. My name's Adam Franklin, and this is the show for people like you and like me who love marketing on the web. You're going to be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. We look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. This show is brought to you by the book that Tobes and I wrote. It's also called Web Marketing That Works, and there is a gift for you for listening to the show, and that is the bundle of 33 free marketing templates. You can get your hands on those at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Okay, so today's guest, Francisca Iseli. You may know her as the co-founder of Basic Bananas that provides marketing education to businesses all around Australia and also all around the world via the online programs. But she's also written a book, or co-written a book with her husband, Chris, and it is called Perception. And her and Chris have written other books in the past, but this is the second one, and that's the topic of today's discussion. Now, I actually met Francisca at the We Are Podcast conference on the Gold Coast in 2016 and really liked what she was about. So it was a big thrill to have her live in the studio to talk about the book Perception. So let's head over to the show. It's Adam Franklin here, and welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Today's slightly different. We've got our guest live in the studio, Francisca Iseli. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me in your studio.
It's a pleasure.
The view is amazing in your studio, actually. Looking at the ocean over Bondi Beach.
It's nice of you to join me. And, of course, you're the founder of Basic Bananas, and you've written your second book, Perception, right?
Yeah. I'm working on the third one, actually, which is all about contradictions. I haven't told you even about that yet.
No, this is brand new sort of stuff.
Nobody has. This is the first time I'm ever publicly talking about the third one, but we won't even talk about it, but just announce it.
Yeah.
Pre-launch it.
We can talk about that again in another show.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the second book you've written called Perception, because I think a lot of what you talk about in that is obviously how people perceive you and what we can do to actually impact how people interpret us as people and also as companies. What are some of the key concepts that you'd like to share from the book?
Yeah, so probably the first thing that I'd like to share is just before we hopped on the call here on the recording, we spoke about the best marketing strategies and what are the best ways for a small business or even a medium-sized business to grow. And one thing that I strongly believe in that most people forget to consider and to work on is positioning and perception. So really figuring out how they want to be perceived in the first place. So thinking very strategically about their positioning of their business in the market. And because a lot of businesses don't do that, they don't get everything they can out of those marketing strategies that you talk about a lot. So I always, say you can have the best strategies, the best marketing strategies, the best traffic generators. If you don't have a very solid positioning in the market, if people don't perceive you the way that you want to be perceived, you don't get the return that you deserve or the return that you want from those strategies. So that's probably one of the most important things. Now, should I just keep talking a little bit?
Look, I was just actually going to talk to you about an example you mentioned in the book about Best and Less, and how a lot of people see that as a discount budget store and wouldn't necessarily go in there. But there was the B&E, or was it the L&B experiment.
Yes.
So talk to us more about that, because I was intrigued by that.
It was a great experiment. So Best and Less is, for all the overseas listeners, is an Australian sort of discount store, but I think their sort of tagline is it's quality for less. So you don't pay a lot, but you still get the same quality is what they claim. Now, because people have that perception about them, for them to be just a bit sort of cheap, and it is cheap, a lot of people wouldn't shop there because it's just cheap, and it looks maybe cheap and it is cheap. and the perception is that. So they wanted to prove that they actually have good quality stuff and they could charge more if they wanted to. So they set up this experiment in Sydney at a sort of upper class mall where they had a store called L&B. And what they did is it was a beautiful store, didn't have a lot of stuff in there. It looked very sort of premium and expensive. And it was the same clothing. It was Best and Less, but under a label called L&B. And people would walk in there, get a dress off the rack, go to the checkout and say, hey, I want to buy this dress. It's whatever, $200. The girl at the checkout would say, actually, it's only a third of this price because it is Best and Less. And so the reaction of a lot of people was like, oh, but I wouldn't shop at Best and Less. But it's the same item of clothing. So just purely through influencing the perception, the image of a brand, suddenly people wanted to buy it for 3 or 4 times the price. And that's why I believe perception and creating the right perception in the market is probably the first and most fundamental, most important thing you can do for your business if you want to succeed, if you want to grow, if you want to be seen a certain way, which you certainly do.
And that reminds me of a story from a book I'm reading called Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley. And he talks about a very similar thing in terms of a handbag store. I think it was Louis Vuitton or some really high-end store. And he said that you have to queue up outside, and in some stores, they let you in one person at a time.
Interesting.
And you let the security guard or the host at the front door, you tell them sort of what you're looking to shop for, and they have this totally, it's just for you. Like you're the only person in the store, but once you leave,
so cool.
You're at the back of the queue again. Yeah. So you go and you get access to everything. But then people love to go there and pay hundreds or thousands of times more than other handbags, which he says, compared to the other guy screaming from the street corner selling his wares saying discount handbags and
they're probably made in the same factory.
Very, quite possibly. And he said, yes, there's a lot of differences from the perception side, but if an alien landed on our planet and was asked to compare the differences between the two handbags, I'd go, there's essentially no difference.
Yeah, and another good example about handbags, some of these companies like Louis Vuitton, they would once a year, and this is another good marketing concept for your listeners even, once a year or so they would bring out this super fancy, super high-end handbag that is maybe, let's say, 20 grand. And it's the one-off piece once a year that is very exclusive. They only make a certain amount of those bags. Now, what that does is most people don't buy this handbag. Some still do, but most people don't. But suddenly the $5,000 handbag is actually, it's not that much. Compared to the 20 grand handbag, it's like, oh, I'm only paying 5 grand suddenly. And so suddenly the perception, it's called a price anchor. But it also, so a price anchor is when you have a sort of very high-end item in your business, whether it's a service or a product. And it creates this contrast where you suddenly think, actually, paying 5 grand for a handbag is suddenly not that much compared to 20 grand. And it works. It works. We had a business actually. This is a really funny example, as in funny, like hilarious.
We'll be the judge of that. Tell your story.
So this business, they make toasties. Like the toasties are those sandwiches, right? Yeah.
That's what we call them, yeah.
Yeah, toasties. So he's got this sandwich shop and he makes toasties. And he had so he went to one of our programs, the Clever Bunch. And in one of them, we talk about this concept of price anchoring. And so he said, well, I'm going to do a $20 toasty. And it just got all, normally how much is a toasty? I don't know, because I'm vegetarian. I don't even eat this stuff.
Maybe, yeah, $5.
Yeah.
$8 if it's fancy.
Yeah. So he made a $20 toasty and put all the fancy stuff in there. I don't even know what it was because I'm not a foodie, but it was all the fanciest of the fancy things. And it was $20. And suddenly he became talk aboutable. So this one $20 toasty made him talk aboutable. All the other toasties were still the same price, $5 or whatever. But he had the $20 toasty. It got picked up in the Perth newspaper at one of the local newspapers there. He had a picture of him and it said $20 toasty, and he got great publicity. And people wanted to go to his shop because suddenly it's like, he's the one that has the $20 toasty. Let's go check it out. And then paying $5 for a toasty is a bargain.
It's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we found out when we've priced our own programs that if we do have a really high-end offering, maybe somebody will take it, but if not, then it does anchor the price and it does seem cheaper in comparison.
I'm glad you bring that out because it works for services too. So service-based businesses that are listening right now, they might think, well, how do I do that? Exactly. It works for products and services actually.
And you think about it, there's always people in the market, or there's very often people in the market that do want to pay the premium for either faster results or a high level of service.
Or more customization.
More customization, a high level of perceived status or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you just see it more and more as you travel, like people in first class or business class, they're still getting to the same spot at the same time as you.
And, I get to travel now because I travel so much. I get to travel in business a lot. And the other day I got upgraded to first. And first normally is how much, like maybe double of business. It's not that much better. It's like what people are paying it because they feel a certain way. It makes them feel a certain way to pay this extra money. So maybe for our listeners as a little call to action, quickly moving forward, as you're working on your marketing, think about your perception first. Think about how you're being perceived. And that's the question to ask is, how do you want to be perceived? And when you do this, so you look at your business and you say, how do I want to be perceived by my market? And when you think about it, you use adjectives to describe your business. So you treat your business like if it was a person. So if my business was Johnny, how would I describe Johnny? Well, I want him to be adventurous, professional, charismatic, and a little bit cheeky. And then once you have that image, you then go out and you figure out whether that is the image that you have, whether people actually are perceiving you that way, or you have divergence. Is that a fancy word?
That's a pretty fancy word. Francisco word. Yeah. Divergent. Yeah.
Divergence.
That works.
Yeah. So you're completely off the mark. Then you need to obviously change things in your business to change the perception.
So would you see the key being to see how your market views you and live up to that? Or would you do the other way of thinking, well, I want to be perceived like this and I've got to then convince the market to see me this way?
Yeah, I would do it the second way. So I would always drive to perception, the image from yourself. So thinking about how do I want my business to be perceived? Sometimes it's exactly how you personally are being perceived. So in a lot of cases, the sort of most classic example is the Richard Branson example. His Virgin Empire is very much a reflection of his character. It's charismatic, it's adventurous, it's cheeky, it's him. But then and that works for him. So he drives that, or he was, when he originally created the companies, that was his personality across all businesses. And of course, it's still being lived like that. Now, you can either do that, it's a reflection of you, or if you have the worst character and you don't want your business to be anything like you, that's cool too. You just treat your business like a separate entity and you think about how do I want this business to be perceived. And then you make sure you do everything you can, and how you do that, I'll share in a minute, for people to see you that way. Rather than living up to other people's expectations, you actually dictate what you want them to expect from you. Otherwise, you're playing catch up all the time. And it's sort of, you want to be in control of your perception. You want to be in control of how people think about you, what they feel about you, rather than just leaving it up to chance. Now, how you do that is you take this perception that you created, the image that you want to create, and then you make sure that every touch point that you have with your customers, which is through email, you talk a lot about email marketing, through your website, through your social media, meeting people in person, phone calls, anything you do, all the different touch points need to be reflective of this image. So if I want to be seen as, say, cheeky, my business, then I make sure that everything that I do, say when I rock up to a meeting, there's a little bit of cheek involved. Or when you record a podcast, it's not super sort of stiff, like throwing around fancy words, although we have been throwing some words. But it's sort of, you can just be consistent at every touch point. Or your emails, maybe your email signature is a little bit cheeky. Maybe you have a funny quote in there, or maybe your ads. So one of my ads from about 2 years ago that worked really well on Facebook was a quote I found by Richard Branson. And it was something like, to start a successful business, start with $1 billion and launch an airline. It was totally sarcastic. And so because that fits with our perception at Basic Bananas, it was a great ad. So just think about how could you use the image that you want and use it through all the different touch points. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So Francisca, what are some of the mistakes you see business owners making when it comes to perception?
One of the biggest mistakes when it comes to everything, but including perception, is to go out and copy other people. So it's normal, it's human, I think. But let's say I'm very new into business and maybe I'm an accountant. and I have no idea maybe how I want to do this business because I've never run a business, then I just go and look at my competitors, and I might even just go and, look at their website and copy some of their stuff. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes. So to avoid that, I think you just refrain. Is that a good word?
Refrain's a great word.
Yeah, you're so encouraging. You just refrain from looking at other people's stuff and instead just do your own thing. So rather than copying other people, come up with your own, because when you start to do that, and it might be a little harder maybe for new businesses because you're sort of maybe not confident enough yet, but it will get easier. But the more you do your own thing, the more you can become unique and the more you become talk aboutable. And also the more you're in line with yourself. So it's a lot easier to promote this business, to represent this business rather than trying to be someone else's business. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes, is to go and copy what other people are doing.
So one of people's fears that I tend to find is that they're afraid of putting their personality out there because, of course, there's the possibility of rejection. There's the possibility that people aren't going to like you very much, which is mostly untrue. But how do you help people overcome that fear of actually not just putting boring, bland stuff out there and trying to, hide their personality?
It's such a good question, because I do think it takes a little while to find your voice. I'm sure it took me a little while. I've been in business now for maybe 8 years. Basic Bananas is probably about 8-9 years old. And I remember, and it's one of my first businesses. Now we have a few other businesses, like, the Business Hood. I don't know if you know about this one. It's the branding agency, or Ocean Lovers. I think I've told you about Ocean Lovers. And it's become a lot easier now with practice to find that voice. But I remember in the beginning, I would write something, say, just put some content out. And I'm sure you talk a lot about that on this show, content marketing. And I would read it and I'm like, oh, it doesn't actually have a lot of personality. It's a little bit flat. And so I think it just takes practice, but it also just takes sort of this mindset of not everybody has to like me, because it's almost a good thing. I think it's almost a good thing if there are people that just don't like your style. But there's a fine line, because I have seen people, and I don't want to, name drop or anyone, and I don't even remember their names, but I have seen some very crass people that wanted to be these super crazy potty mouth people, just swearing and sort of being a little bit rude and mean on social media. And they did that full on, and they were successful because some people were really into that. It didn't feel authentic. I felt like they're putting it on rather than actually being that. So I think you just maybe get to know yourself, do some personal development courses and get to know yourself a little more, and then just be comfortable with saying what you think and not worrying too much if someone doesn't like you, because it's normal. I remember, and also, and this is one of my mottos, we don't really get a lot of haters, but we certainly have people that wouldn't work with us because they don't maybe like the cheeky sort of, free-flowing, free-spirited approach that we take, and that's cool. But I always say, if you do get a little bit hated on, it's so easy on social media, especially for someone to be mean, because they can hide behind nothing. So I always say it's not about you. When someone is mean to you, whether it's in person or on social or anywhere on the interwebs, it's got nothing to do with you usually. It's just them probably having a hard time or them not being very happy, because if somebody has to be a troll, I always feel almost a little bit of sympathy towards them. And I think, wow, this person must be maybe a little bit of a sad person if they have to say bad things. I remember when we started Facebook advertising years ago, when it came out, it was a new sort of tool. So ads weren't very accepted back then. Remember that? And people would be hating on your stuff. Now it doesn't happen anymore, but I remember people would be sort of hating on it just because, some people would say, fuck off out of my newsfeed. It's like, what is it? It's like when you read a newspaper, you talk to this ad and you say, fuck off out of my newspaper. But now it became accepted. But I remember on one of the ads, it said, one said, she looks like a bulimic bitch, because I was in the picture. I don't think I look bulimic, but that was just someone hating on me. But imagine if I was bulimic. That would be the worst thing to say to a bulimic person. It's not nice, but it's just haters. And someone else was fantasizing over my feet because I had naked feet, bare feet. I was bare feet. So someone else said something very sexual about my feet. And again, this person has nothing to do with my feet and has never seen my feet in person. But they're just hating on it a little bit, or maybe loving on it. But I always thought, it's got nothing to do with me or anyone, except they have a little bit of just personal, challenges. So that's a really good way to overcome being able to be yourself a bit more and saying what you think without worrying too much what other people think about you, I think.
It's quite reassuring, I think, to know that it does happen to everybody who puts himself out there on the internet, and particularly email too. I think a lot of people will reply back to emails that I write and assume that no one's going to read it, or assume it's just a robot sending it
Really?
off.
Do you get? I don't get actually emails that are nasty. Do you get some?
Occasionally,
What did I say?
very similar to the
Really?
how you were framing it before.
You look a little bit.
not about my feet or my physique, but more like F off and all this sort of
That
stuff.
is hilarious.
But and oftentimes I say, look, I'll unsubscribe you, it's okay. But they're amazed that people actually are reading the replies and are human beings. And I think sometimes people just forget that there's a human on the end of these things, oftentimes because they probably are ignored or they don't get a response from people. So
and I love your response, because I think you can do whatever you want. But for me personally, I can only respond to hate with love. Normally, I don't respond at all if it's like someone talking about my feet that I don't know. But I remember a few months ago, I was talking about the label Girl Boss. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it was all across the media. Basically, they made a big drama out of it because I said that I don't really like this label, Girl Boss or Lady Boss, because why do we need it? Do we have a boy boss label? No. And so I was talking about it, the media picked it up, but then the media sort of made it seem like I was talking against a book called Girl Boss, but I've never read the book. And so the person who wrote this book was suddenly mean girling me on Twitter. And I don't really use Twitter, but I got suddenly some mean tweets from this writer and some of her followers. And I looked at it. It was actually on my way up to the podcasting thing that we spoke at, Adam and I. And I looked on my phone, it had some pop-ups. I'm like, oh wow, my Twitter is going off. Normally my Twitter is quiet because I don't use it. And after I had an hour on the plane, luckily, so I couldn't react, which is a good thing. And then I just looked at the worst ones and I just sent them some really nice messages saying, hey, thanks for, sending me this message. I hope, you're doing really well with your business. Like, it was just a nice message. I didn't engage in the sort of mean girly comments. And a few of them tweeted back saying, hey, so sorry for sending this shitty tweet. It's just Twitter. So people often don't think enough, I think, when they're mean or when they're hating on you. So I think the only way to respond, like you say, in an email, even, hey, it's okay, I'll unsubscribe you. It's the best way. I would never bite back.
Yeah, I think that's such a great rule of thumb, to be friendly and to realise that, everybody gets a bit of a hard time online, and not to take it personally. They're not like, they don't know you, Francisca, as a person, or me, off a Facebook advert. And so,
and they might have just had the worst day. Maybe they just heard the worst news, and then all they can do is go and say something nasty
and lash out at a stranger.
Yes.
So certainly, if you're listening, don't let those sorts of things put you off, because that's part of the course, and you will get a little bit, but it's just going to be a tiny fraction of all the good.
And you know what?
stuff.
As you get bigger, usually, and more people see you, and you poke your head out more, and you become talkaboutable, you'll get probably a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's okay.
But it's still a bit small percentage relative to the good feedback that you get in all the people you help and who do actually like you. So, it's always a bit of a good. I think Seth Godin talks about it too, pleasing everybody.
He just popped in my mind. Wasn't he the one that spoke about he would go speak at a conference that maybe 1,000 people, 999 would love him. One would send him one very bad tweet or message, and he's down. Well, not anymore, but he would be down for 3 days, thinking, "Wow, this person really didn't like my presentation." Whereas that's just, what about the 999 that really liked you? So they should just ignore, I think.
Same with Amazon reviews and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had one review on our podcast, which was a 3-star review, but the girl said, "This is my favorite show in the universe." I'm like, why didn't you give us 5 stars? Come on. Maybe she saw 3. Maybe it's a different culture. In some cultures, maybe 3 stars is a good star.
Yeah, like you'd never give a 5.
Or maybe you just don't even realize that there's more than 3. Maybe 3 is just your best number.
So, Francisca, how can people find out more about not only Basic Bananas, but some of these other businesses that you spoke about as well?
Yeah, look, probably the best place to go to see all the things that I'm involved in is my own website, which is going to be very interesting to spell. See if Adam can spell it.
Well, say it first. FranciscaEasily.com.
FranciscaEasily.com. Do you want to spell it?
Yeah, I'll spell it. ziskaiseli.com.
Impressed. You've been practicing, it's not just .com.
I always got good marks in my spelling bees at school.
Wow, you are the first human being in the universe outside of Switzerland that can spell my name in one go without well, you probably have been practicing. But this is
I wasn't sure it was .com or .au, so which one is it?
.com, probably both, but .com is the one that usually works. .com, and you can see everything there. You can check out oceanlovers.com. It's a really fun brand.
So what's that all about?
Ocean Lovers is one of my favorite things right now to work on. It's a company I only launched a year ago, and we launch different products that are inspired by the ocean, but that are also sustainable and good for you, good for the world. So our first product is a surf suit made from recyclable fabrics. It's super cute. It's for girls at the moment. We'll do some boy things. I've got supplements made from algae, so made from things from the ocean that don't deplete the ocean, but that are good for you. So it's sort of our latest fun project. And then the businesshood.com. But you can find all this stuff on franciskaiseli.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to call that a day. Thanks for coming along.
You're so welcome.
And that's a wrap for my chat with Francisca. What a bundle of energy and some awesome insights there. So, of course, don't forget to get her book, Perception, and check out her website, franciskaiseli.com. And I hope you found the show valuable and actionable. Of course, there's the bonus 33 free marketing templates that you can download. Head over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Any feedback I'm open to, shoot it through to me at adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you left us a review or rating on iTunes or Stitcher. And until the next show, take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.